The sun was setting over the wide and lonesome plains of Arizona Territory, casting long shadows across the parched land, where dust and sorrow walked hand in hand. At the edge of that dying light stood a small cabin, its roof sagging, its windows half covered with old flour sacks, and inside it a woman, young, fragile, and trembling, rocked a crying baby in her arms. Her name was Martha Ellis, the widow of a ranch hand who'd died 6 months ago when his horse was shot out from under him during a cattle raid gone wrong. Her husband's people, rough, bitter, and cruel, had turned against her since the day the baby was born. "That child ain't ours," her mother-in-law had spat the night the little girl came into the world. "My son was gone too long for that to be his blood." From then on, Martha's life had become a living torment. They'd taken the ranch, her belongings, even the old horse her husband left her, and still she stayed. Because there was nowhere else to go, and because she believed the Lord would one day send a hand of mercy from somewhere beyond the dust. That day came when the sun burned hottest and the air smelled of anger. Martha had spent the morning hauling water from the well with her baby tied against her chest, the child's small body hot against her skin. She was halfway back to the cabin when the door slammed open and her brother-in-law, Tom Ellis, stormed out, drunk on whiskey and hate. "You still feeding that bastard?" he sneered. Martha didn't answer. She just kept walking. But Tom wasn't the kind of man to let silence be the final word. He grabbed her arm so hard she dropped the bucket. "You think you can shame this family with your lies?" he hissed. "My brother's been dead near a year. That brat's not his." Martha's eyes glistened with tears, her lips trembling as she whispered, "She's his. She's all I have left." That only made him angrier. He shoved her to the ground and his mother came running, shouting vile words, her face twisted with rage. The older woman snatched the crying baby from Martha's arms, raising her hand as if to strike even the innocent child. Martha screamed, crawling forward, but Tom kicked her in the ribs and sent her sprawling into the dirt. And that's when a voice, deep and commanding, rolled across the wind like thunder. "That's enough." All heads turned. A rider sat on a tall chestnut horse at the edge of the yard, his hat low, his coat dusty, the setting sun painting fire around his shoulders. The horse snorted and pawed the ground as the stranger swung down, his boots hitting the earth like judgment. "You folks got a strange way of treating women out here," he said, his voice calm but edged like steel. "Who are you to meddle?" Tom barked, puffing his chest, but the man only tilted his hat back slightly, revealing eyes cold as mountain ice. "Name's Clint Harrow," he said. "I rode through these parts looking for peace, but I found something else instead." Tom laughed a bitter laugh. "Ain't your business." Clint stepped closer, slow, steady. "When a man lays hands on a woman like that, it becomes every decent man's business." The silence was heavy enough to crush bone. Tom reached for his revolver, but Clint was faster. His Colt flashed in the dying light, and before Tom's gun even cleared leather, the hammer on Clint's clicked back with a warning. "Don't," Clint said softly. "You ain't fast enough." Martha sat trembling, clutching her side, eyes wide as tears streaked the dirt on her face. The old woman spat on the ground and hissed, "You don't know what she's done. She's lying about that baby." Clint's gaze moved to the infant, who whimpered softly in the woman's arms. "Ain't my place to judge bloodlines," he said, "but I know what cruelty looks like, and you folks wear it plain." He holstered his gun and bent to help Martha up. "Come on, ma'am." I can't," she whispered. "They'll kill me if I try to leave." "Not today," Clint said, his tone gentle but firm. "Today you ride with me." The mother-in-law lunged forward, but Clint turned, eyes flashing. "Touch her again, and I swear the ground won't be enough to hide your sins." Tom, humiliated, cursed and spat, but the stranger's hand hovered near his gun and courage died on his lips. Clint helped Martha onto his horse, lifted the baby into her arms, and without another word rode off into the coming night. They rode hard until the hills swallowed them, until the air cooled and the stars burned bright above. Martha held her, baby close, afraid to speak, afraid the moment would vanish if she made a sound. When they finally stopped by a creek under a cottonwood tree, Clint built a fire and handed her a canteen. "Drink," he said softly. You're safe now. The tears she'd been holding back poured out like a storm. Why'd you help me? She asked between sobs. You don't even know me. Clint stared into the fire, his face carved from shadow and sorrow. I once had a wife, he said quietly. Men took her from me. Same kind of men who think cruelties are right. I swore if I ever saw that again, I wouldn't stand by. Martha looked at him, her heart heavy and grateful. You saved us. Clint shook his head. No, ma'am. The good Lord did. I just rode where he pointed. They camped there for 2 nights, resting and healing. Clint hunted, brought back rabbits, fetched water, and spoke little. Martha watched him, his quiet strength, the way he treated her baby like something sacred. For the first time in months, she felt safe. On the 3rd morning, as the light spilled gold over the plains, Martha told him everything. How her husband had been shot by rustlers, how his family blamed her, how they'd beaten her nearly every week since. Clint listened without interruption, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. When she finished, he said, They won't hurt you again. Not while I breathe. And he meant it. They traveled west toward a small frontier town called Dry Creek, hoping to find work and a fresh start. Along the trail, whispers spread about a widow and a lone cowboy traveling together. Some said he was a bounty hunter. Others said he'd once been an outlaw redeemed by mercy. To Martha, he was neither. He was her miracle in boots and dust. But peace never stays long in the West. One evening, as they approached town, Clint spotted 3 riders in the distance, Tom and 2 hired guns, riding hard. They came after you, Clint said grimly. Get down, stay low. Martha clutched her baby, eyes wide. No, Clint, please don't. But Clint just tipped his hat, loaded his revolver, and said, Some debts have to be settled. The gunfight was over before the echoes stopped bouncing off the rocks. Clint stood tall, smoke curling from his Colt. Tom lay in the dirt, wounded but alive. Clint walked over, his voice like gravel. You can crawl back to your mama and tell her this. There's no shame in walking away from hate. Tom spat blood, eyes burning with fear and resentment. You think she'll thank you? She's nothing. Clint looked down at him. That woman's worth more than every man who's ever raised a hand to her. He holstered his gun, mounted his horse, and turned to Martha. Come on, let's get you to town. When they arrived in Dry Creek, the townsfolk stared but said nothing. Clint spoke with the preacher and arranged a place for Martha to stay, a small cabin by the river with flowers out front. Over the next few weeks, life began to bloom again. Martha found work sewing, and the baby, now laughing freely, filled the air with joy. Clint came by often, fixing fences, chopping wood, saying little but meaning everything. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Martha stood at the door and said, You could stay, you know. Clint smiled faintly. Tempting, he said. But men like me were made for the road. There's always someone else out there needing help. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Then promise you'll come back someday. Clint looked at her, then at the baby in her arms, and said softly, I reckon I will, if the wind carries me this way again. He rode off into the fading light, his silhouette shrinking against the fiery horizon. Martha watched until he disappeared, then whispered, Thank you, stranger. The baby cooed in her arms as if answering. Life would never be the same, but it would go on, stronger, braver, because of one man's courage to stand against cruelty. Somewhere on the open trail, Clint Harrow rode on, a lone cowboy carrying justice where it had gone missing. And maybe, just maybe, the world grew a little kinder that night.